and we conduct a series of conversations on some important topics. And today we are here with Ambassador Munir Akram to observe October 27th as the Black Day, along with all the Kashmiris around the across the globe. So thank you so much, Ambassador Munir Akram, for being here with us. I would like to introduce you, although you don't need an introduction, but I'd like to introduce you for a broader audience. Mr. Akram assumed his position as permanent representative of Pakistan to the United Nations with the rank of Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary on November 1st, 2019. Ambassador Akram previously served as Pakistan's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in New York for 6 years, between 2002 and 2008, after serving as ambassador and permanent representative to the UN in Geneva for 7 years, from 1995 to 2002. Between 1988 and 92, Ambassador Munir Akram was Pakistan's ambassador to the European Council, Belgium, and Luxemburg. During his term at the United Nations, Ambassador Munir Akram served twice as president of the Security Council in May 2003 and in May 2004, president of the Economic and Social Council in 2005, chairman of the Group of 77 in China in 2007, and facilitator on UN administrative reforms in 2006. Among the positions he has held in various intergovernmental organizations were member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board on Disarmament, chairman of the WTO Trade Review Policy, president of the Conference of Disarmament. Ambassador Akram joined the Foreign Service of Pakistan in 1967, and he has held various positions in the Foreign Ministry as Additional Foreign Secretary and DG dealing with the United Nations. He has a bachelor's degree in law and a master's degree in political science from the University of Karachi. He's a prolific writer. I'm a huge fan of your writing, sir, and has lectured and published several articles and papers on various strategic, political, and economic issues. And in recognition of his selfless service and outstanding performance in the field of diplomacy and foreign policy, Ambassador Akram was conferred the award of Hilal-e-Quaid-e-Azam by the President of Pakistan. So thank you so much for being here with us today at this extremely important occasion. And it is not only on these occasions that we feel for the Kashmiris and the suffering that they have gone through and continue to undergo, but it is also important to apprise our younger generation as to why, such days are marked and as to why we stand in solidarity with our Kashmiri brothers and sisters. So with this, sir, we have the kind of format that we have for this conversation is that I'll pose certain questions to you, and we would seek, your insights on those questions. You're free to comment on these questions, and we can, move along. So thank you once again. With this, my, opening question to you, and I think it's a very basic question. Everybody, talks about it on every forum. Since 2019, as we speak today, even, India's brutal annexation of Indian illegally occupied Kashmir has now entered its third year. And the world, we have seen, has turned the other way. There are human rights organizations, some of them are vocal and making some noises, but they're not too vociferous in condemning India. And resultantly, the Kashmiris continue to wilt under pressure. How, I'm going to ask you, because you're in such an important position, how is Pakistan navigating this set of structural impediments at the diplomatic level? And is there any light at the end of the tunnel for the brutalized yet indomitable Kashmiris? So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rabia. First of all, I think we should recall that the Kashmiri struggle for freedom is not 3 years old. It's over 70 years old. And even by some counts, 100 years old, where the Muslims of Jammu and Kashmir have been struggling for their rights, first under the Dogra rule and later under Indian rule. There have been ups and downs in the struggle, and the Kashmiri people have have suffered greatly, especially since 1989, when the popular revolt, popular revolution was put down heavily and massively by force, by Indian occupation forces. And Kashmiris have lost 100,000 people since then. The juncture from the 5th of August 2019 was the latest in this story of oppression. Violence against the Kashmiris had continued, and since 2014, when one saw the killing of Burhan Wani, that oppression had intensified. And Pakistan, of course, was condemnatory of those steps, but we actually mobilized our diplomatic and political response to Indian oppression only in 2019. Once with the election of Prime Minister Imran Khan, and when we had the exchanges with India in February of 2019, that was a precursor to what was to follow. And then the 5th August measures were instituted, and we launched our diplomatic campaign throughout the world. To judge the campaign, we must also see what we didn't do in the previous decade. We were not very vocal. And the cause of Kashmir languished because nobody else will raise Kashmir unless Pakistan raises Kashmir. We are the voice of the Kashmiris internationally. So since then, we have re-internationalized, if you will, the issue. It is on the agenda, revived consideration in the Security Council 3 times. It is active on the Human Rights Council agenda. We have statements from the Secretary General of the United Nations saying that the solution of this crisis will have to be based on the UN Charter and the Security Council resolutions. These are important developments in the context of what we were not doing before. In those 10 years, when we were not doing as much as we should have, the Indians had changed the narrative on Kashmir. They had portrayed Kashmir as a terrorist struggle. They had put Kashmiri freedom movement under Security Council sanctions and on terrorist lists. And unfortunately, Pakistan had accepted that. We have since then changed the narrative. We have portrayed that the Kashmiri struggle is a legitimate struggle for self-determination. And we have quoted chapter and verse from Security Council resolutions, from the debates on Kashmir, from international law, from international humanitarian law, in order to justify our contention that the Kashmiri struggle is a legitimate freedom struggle, and that people who are struggling for their legitimate right of self-determination have the right to struggle by all means, and they have the right to be provided material and moral support in their struggle. This is the case that we have made, and there is growing recognition of the fact that the Kashmiri struggle is a struggle, and that the Kashmir dispute is a threat to international peace and security. Now, that is the work of diplomacy that we have to do. And of course, India is able to block decisions in the Security Council because it has certain permanent members on its side. Today, India is sitting on the council itself and therefore is in a better position to block decisions. But nevertheless, every other member of the Security Council in private conversations recognize that there is oppression in Kashmir, and that the Kashmir dispute is a threat to international peace and security and must be resolved peacefully. So I think these are gains diplomatically. We have to persist in this effort. The Kashmiri struggle, as I said, is 100 years old. We have to persist in ensuring that it remains on the top of the agenda of the international community. And circumstances can change, which can change the equation, which is adverse at the moment because of India's large economy, its alliances with certain great powers. But that situation can change. And we have to work towards that change in our diplomacy, as well as in our security policy and our strategic policy. And our Kashmir policy of our government is not only limited to diplomacy, there is also a strategic backdrop. And that backdrop is changing, and we will have to see how that evolves.
Thank you so much. You're very right. I think Pakistan was late to the game, but slowly that narrative is changing, and we are putting Kashmir again on, map of the world, so to speak. We hear this term lawfare quite often when it comes to Kashmir, and for the purpose of greater understanding, I would want you to shed some light for our students and broader community who connects with us as to what are some of the lawfare options that Pakistan has on Kashmir within the UN system, because we have seen you make the case, Pakistan make the case, which is grounded in international law and conventions, whereas we continue to see India violating those very principles with regard to Kashmir with complete impunity. So would you like to, tell us what your understanding of lawfare is with respect to Kashmir, and what are some of the options that Pakistan can exercise?
Well, I think this use of the word lawfare has become a little prevalent in Islamabad. And in my own view, we have the best lawfare. We have the Security Council resolutions. Resolution 47 of 1948 is very explicit. It states that the dispute has to be resolved through a plebiscite by the Kashmiri people. And that is the best decision. A clear decision by the highest political and security body of the international community, which states that Kashmir dispute has to be resolved through a free and fair plebiscite held under United Nations auspices. Therefore, I don't think you can get a better legal outcome from any other institution especially not at this time. The Security Council resolutions also prescribe that any unilateral changes that are made by any of the parties in Jammu and Kashmir, in the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir, that these are not recognized, that these will not compromise the Security Council's call for a plebiscite. So I don't think that legally you could go to any court of justice or any other court and ask for a better political or legal decision. And therefore, I think we have to be very careful when we talk about going to various institutions, because you will never get a better outcome legally and politically as such. What remains, of course, and in terms of what you could do, is to explore the possibility of legally persecuting those persons and officials of India who are responsible for crimes against the Kashmiri people, for human rights violations, for war crimes, for crimes against humanity that are being committed every day of the week in Kashmir. Now, there are, of course, certain institutions where we can go, and there are others where we cannot go. And the biggest obstacle with regard to legal recourse so far in international institutions for us has been the reservations that have been put by India on the jurisdiction of the ICJ, which bars us from taking certain issues, and the fact that as far as the International Criminal Court is concerned, neither India nor Pakistan are parties to the ICC. So that option also is difficult, legally speaking. Now we have to be imaginative, and we have to find certain other ways of bringing Indian crimes to justice. And there are other ways. There are national jurisdictions in certain countries which can take up extraterritorial issues. And we have to find ways in which we can do that. And I think we are working on options. The Foreign Office just put out the dossier, which lists, I think, about almost 2,800 specific allegations of criminal behavior by Indian officials. We have their names and we have their particulars, and we have to see how to bring them to justice. As I said, the international avenues are blocked, but we will be looking at other options of how to criminalize some of these and bring the persons who we believe have committed crimes, how to bring them to justice. I think that is an open option which we will have to explore through various means.
Thank you so much. What worries me most about Indian strategy, because I think it definitely is a strategy that has been put in place, is them giving them domicile and then changing the demographics in Kashmir. And then once they get to a point where they have achieved that objective, then they were going to say, okay, fine, you have UNSC resolutions, and so let's have a plebiscite. And then you would, not have the same majority that you have today, but then you would have Hindu majority in Kashmir, given the change in demographics. I don't know what your take on it is. India is buying time because it's going to take time to make those changes with respect to the domiciles to take effect, and then that could dilute, what the resolutions stand for. What is your take on this Indian buying time strategy, and we, sitting and waiting for international law and remaining within the means of the law for it to take effect?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that India would ever agree to a plebiscite, no matter what, even if they had inducted Hindus by the dozens and by the millions into Kashmir. I don't think that they will agree to a plebiscite. I think the purpose of the demographic flooding of Kashmir is to suppress the Muslim majority at that place. It is not with a view to having a plebiscite, but with a view to easing the oppression and control of the Muslim majority, which they are unable to control at the present moment. If you read history, there is no way that such a large segment of population, I mean, there are, I guess, about 7-8 million Kashmiris in the Kashmir Valley alone, apart from others in Ladakh and Jammu and so forth. How many Hindus could India inundate in order to crush the spirit of the Kashmiris and make them accept Indian rule? They have already got 900,000 troops there. These are men with rifles and guns who are able to crush the Kashmiris. And this is the only reason that there has not been a widespread revolt, a popular revolt, because people obviously would be, fear being killed in mass slaughter by the Indian troops. So if the Indian troops have not been able to crush the Kashmiri spirit for freedom, no amount of Hindu settlers are going to be able to do that. I think there will be no settlers en masse in Kashmir because they are themselves afraid. You see the Kashmiri Pandits who left the valley in 1989, they have not been able to return. They don't want to return because they understand that they are not welcome or that they will be under threat and so forth. So I don't think this BJP RSS conception that we will flood the Kashmir Valley with Hindus and thereby control it. I don't think it's a realistic plan. I think they will fail in this plan, as they have failed since 2019. This 5 August measures that they have put, they've had to control it by military force. The legal shenanigans that they have been up to doesn't make any difference. The fact of the matter is that the Kashmiri people reject it. No matter what Pakistan or anybody else says, the Kashmiri people say, we are still Kashmiris. We still believe in the state of Kashmir. We still are one, etc. So it doesn't really matter the kind of legal and other measures that the Indians are following. I mean, in the process, look at what they have done to themselves. Look at the fact that they've had to induct 900,000 troops. The fact that when they took the 5 August measures, they not only raised objections from Pakistan, but raised objections from China. And what has been the consequence of those objections? You're seeing those consequences on the ground in security reality of what India is facing from China today. And that has changed the military equation. It has changed the security equation. And therefore, I think when people say that, Kashmir, or, we are not losing the fight on Kashmir, the Kashmiri people have no light at the end of the tunnel. That's not true. I think today, the Kashmiri struggle is much more advanced. If India goes to war with Pakistan, it has to think of not a two-front war, it's got to think of a 2.5-front war as such. So I believe that we have to continue with our campaign of explaining the Kashmiri cause, generating support for the Kashmiri cause, influencing the positions of the major powers so that they change their policies on Kashmir and speak up and speak out and urge the Indians to halt the violations of human rights. It is only once that happens, a peaceful settlement will result when India is convinced that its policies are failing, that they are wrong, and that there is another path, a peaceful path to a settlement in Kashmir. That's what we have to aim for a peaceful settlement. But if peaceful settlement doesn't happen, the Kashmiri people have shown they've risen again and again and again, and it is like any other liberation struggle. The people will not live under oppression. They will rise again and again against the Indians. And how long, at what cost does India hold Kashmir? It will have to judge.
Absolutely. Wonderfully articulated, Ambassador Akram. The spirit is just unbreakable, and we've seen that over several decades. And I'm sure it's going to continue like this, but I just hope that their period of misery and struggle comes to an end. I will ask a last question. I understand, you have a busy schedule. So it is with respect to public diplomacy, and we are a university, we are academics and scholars who engage with the subject and are, teaching next generation to think out of the box on Kashmir. And, in your speeches, in your presence at the UN and at various other international forums, I've seen that you've laid great emphasis on reorienting Pakistan's multilateral and multifaceted public diplomacy drive at the UN with a view to engaging multiple stakeholders on Kashmir issue. And it has been successful. So what importance do you give to public diplomacy and advocacy in Kashmir? We as academics, we as a generation that uses social media platform, does not do traditional diplomacy. So how can broader public diplomacy agenda bring in people from Pakistan and from other countries in the world to talk about Kashmir so that a difference is made and the narrative that is generated, has a positive impact for the Kashmir struggle?
Thank you, Rabi. The most important step which the Indians took after 5 August was the internet shutdown. The blackout of the Kashmiris, to keep them in the dark, to keep the world in the dark about what was happening in Kashmir. So I think part of our campaign was against that lockdown. And the purpose of that campaign against the lockdown was to enable the world to have an eye into what was happening in Kashmir. And I think there we have been partially successful. And today the world has a much better idea of the kind of atrocities, kind of oppression that exists in Kashmir, that is being perpetrated against the Kashmiri people. And I think this is important, because it is only once this information is available to the world, and first of all, the first responders will be the media, and then it will be the international human rights organizations, and from there it will be the international human rights intergovernmental bodies, and hopefully thereafter the influence will be impacted on the legislators and think tanks and academics in the Western democracies. And the policy of the Western democracies will only change with their public opinion. So our diplomatic target, one, of course, we are targeting the governments of the powerful of the world and through direct diplomacy. But since we know the obstacles we face there, we have to change their policies through public diplomacy, through going directly to their people, to going directly to the opinion makers in those countries. Because once we can change the opinion of the public in Western democracies, whether it's the United States, United Kingdom, Europe, these are democracies, and the politicians there have to listen to their people. We have to, therefore, not only do direct diplomacy with governments, but also indirect diplomacy with the publics and go directly to the publics. And for that, public diplomacy is essential, it's vital, and we must redouble our efforts at the grassroots level to change public opinion about Kashmir, because once that happens, policies of the major powers change, India will be obliged to change its policies.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. And, on behalf of everybody, here in Pakistan and our institution, our students and faculty, we would like to, salute you for your services. And you're doing a commendable job, raising the flag of Kashmir and holding on to it. And your entire team, in fact, at the UN, at the Foreign Office, are working together to discredit, India's disinformation campaign that they've launched. We all were a witness to Saima Salim's, intervention, and it was a proud moment for all of us. So thank you so much, sir. We will continue to have this conversation. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabi. Nice speaking.
All right.